At 61 seconds into the live hearing, Jasmine Crockett ripped open a blood-red envelope and dropped a $3.1 million bomb on Trump's legacy, a buried DNA file, a hidden child, and a president who froze on live TV. What did she just expose that made the whole country stop breathing? The caption on CNN said Oversight Committee Executive Ethics, but nothing about this hearing felt ethical or overseen. The cameras blinked red like sniper dots. The flags behind the dais looked less like symbols of justice and more like props on a courtroom set. No one in the room expected anything explosive, just another drawn-out session of political theater where everyone already knew their lines. A few members scrolled their phones under the desk. One passed a mint to another. The chair leaned back already half bored. Staffers shuffled paper just to look busy. The country was watching, but only barely, except Jasmine Crockett. She wasn't sipping coffee. She wasn't making side eyes. She was gripping a thick red folder like it was a live wire. Her nails dug into the cardstock as if holding it any looser would let the whole thing ignite. For 21 minutes, she hadn't moved. And when she finally did, it wasn't casual. Her hands slid over the seal like someone defusing a bomb slow-practiced intentional. At exactly the 61st second of the hour, she removed her glasses. Not to clean them, to make sure no one missed what came next. When she stood, the air changed. Something sharp cut through the room. She didn't look at her colleagues. She didn't look at the cameras. She looked straight ahead, right at the man who thought this was just another day in power. And without raising her voice, Jasmine Crockett lit the fuse. She didn't ask for attention. She took it. Jasmine Crockett rose from her seat like someone who had waited long enough, waited through the niceties, through the smirks, through the theater of power wrapped in protocol. She removed her glasses slowly, not out of courtesy but calculation. Her voice when it came didn't rise. It dropped, and somehow that made everything louder. "I'd like to shift this conversation," she said, calm as a blade. Not toward tradition, but toward truth. Her words didn't echo, they landed. Flat, cold, heavy. A few heads turned. One aide stopped typing mid-note. Another leaned in, sensing something off-script was about to erupt. Jasmine opened the red folder without flourish. Inside was a single-scan, grainy grayscale, but legible. She held it up without trembling. "This document," she said, "was sealed in 2019 under a private court order out of Arizona. It involves a high-ranking government official, a former staffer, and a child." That word child hit the room like a dropped microphone. The panel stiffened. Someone shifted in their chair audibly. Jasmine didn't pause. "It also includes a $3.1 million payment." She continued flipping the page, and this phrase unredacted, DNA confirmation pending, non-disclosure enforced. No one breathed. Not the witnesses, not the camera crew. Even the chairman froze his pen, hovering midair. This wasn't policy anymore. It wasn't politics, it was personal. And Jasmine Crockett had just named the storm without saying his name. The words hadn't even finished leaving Jasmine's lips when CNN slammed into breaking news mode. The chyron at the bottom of the screen stuttered mid-sentence, then locked into bold red. Congresswoman Crockett raises explosive paternity allegation against former president. In less than 60 seconds, MSNBC followed. Fox hesitated, then cut in. America mid-lunch or mid-errand collectively stopped chewing. Scrolling breathing. In the West Wing, silence didn't mean peace, it meant panic. Phones buzzed across desks like trapped bees. Aide after aide leaned into headsets trying to get confirmation on what they'd just seen. Someone hit pause on the feed. Rewind. Play again. And again. No one could believe what they'd heard, yet no one could deny it either. Thousands of miles away at Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump was watching the feed on delay when Jasmine's voice sliced through the speakers like a scalpel. His drink clinked in his hand. He stood up so fast the chair behind him screeched. She said what he barked, spinning toward his chief aide. "Did she just say Baron?" The aide didn't answer. He couldn't, because by now the internet had already answered for him. TikTok clips were multiplying like wildfire. Twitter's trending tab was bleeding red with "not his son." People weren't just watching. They were dissecting every syllable, every breath, every micro-expression. And for the first time in years, a man who built his empire on never blinking froze. What secret could make even the president freeze on live TV? Jasmine didn't flinch. As the cameras zoomed in and the room held its breath, she reached back into the red folder and pulled out another page, crisp black and white and deadly precise. She held it at eye level, turning slightly so both the panel and the cameras could catch it. This, she said, is a financial transfer record dated March 20th, 2006, processed through a Delaware-based shell company known for laundering hush funds tied to political operations. She let the paper hover a beat longer before continuing. The recipient A private account under the initials TB, and if you check your calendars, you'll notice that payment was made exactly 3 days after Barron Trump was born. A collective shift rolled through the panel. Papers stopped rustling. No one coughed. No one dared. Somewhere in the back row, a reporter's phone slipped from their fingers and clattered on the tile. The screen behind Jasmine flickered to life with a blown-up image of the transfer, $300,000 wired through 3 intermediaries arriving at a bank in Glendale, Arizona. Jasmine didn't blink. You can redact a name. You can seal a court file. But numbers don't lie, she said. Aide after aide leaned toward their bosses, whispering too late. Reporters who had come expecting policy points now scrambled to record history. Someone tried to object, but their voice cracked and died in their throat. Because in that moment, everyone knew this wasn't just a payment, it was a payoff. And someone somewhere had signed it to keep a legacy from falling apart. The moment Jasmine read the bank name aloud, the first objection hit like a rubber bullet, loud, panicked, and poorly aimed. Madam Chair, I move to redirect the discussion back to the agenda, barked Congressman Overby, his voice cracking as he fumbled with his mic. Another voice joined in, more desperate than authoritative. This is wildly inappropriate. She's grandstanding. But Jasmine didn't even turn her head. She stayed locked on the panel like a surgeon mid-incision. We've spent decades guarding the powerful, she said, steady as stone. I'm here to serve the people. That includes the ones without million-dollar lawyers and private jets. Her voice didn't rise. It just cut deeper. On the screen behind her, new names faded into view beneath the transaction data. Legal signatories, proxy witnesses, former White House legal staff. One in particular drew gasps from the back row, a signature from 2019 clearly marked belonging to a current Senate committee chair. Someone muttered, "We're fed," barely louder than a breath, but the mic caught it. Another member pushed back from the desk, visibly rattled. Jasmine flipped another page. You want names? They're here. You want proof? It's dated, signed, and notarized. The hearing room was no longer a room, it was a sinking ship, and everyone could hear the creak of steel bending under pressure. One senator leaned to whisper something into a staffer's ear, but the cameras caught it. The clip would be online within seconds, and Jasmine. She didn't need to shout. She already knew the building was starting to crack, and the tremors were just getting started. By the time Jasmine closed the red folder, the country was already on fire. TikTok flooded with slowed-down clips of her, flipping the page, her voice layered over dramatic music captions screaming, "She just said it on live TV." Within 20 minutes, the hashtag #NotHisSon broke into the top 3 trends on Twitter, followed closely by Crockett Truth and DNA files. The videos weren't just spreading, they were mutating, dissecting, translating, looping. Every pause in Jasmine's voice became a meme, every silence a signal. In a veterans radio show out of Ohio, a retired Marine named Cal gripped the mic tighter than usual. "If the man's got nothing to hide," he said, voice hoarse, "then why the hell is there a $3 million wire transfer to a ghost name 3 days after the kid's born?" The call board lit up before the host could respond. One woman whispered, "We believed a lie for years." What else did they bury? Even in Trump's strongholds, doubt seeped through. A Baptist pastor in Alabama paused mid-sermon to acknowledge the story, then told his congregation, "If God is truth, why are we so afraid of it?" On Instagram, edits of Jasmine holding the folder were now spliced next to Rosa Parks, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Harriet Tubman. The internet had chosen its heroine. Why would a president hide a payment tied to a child, unless that child changed everything? On the opposite side of the country, in a dim one-bedroom apartment tucked behind a clinic in El Sereno, California, a woman in scrubs stood frozen in front of her TV. Genevieve Larson didn't need to hear the full name. The initials TB spoken by Jasmine Crockett with surgical precision were enough to make her knees buckle. Her coffee slipped from her hand and shattered against the tile. She didn't even flinch. Her chest tightened. The air around her felt like it had been vacuum sealed. She backed away from the screen as if it had reached through and touched her directly. For a second, she thought maybe she imagined it, until Jasmine said the number. $3.1 million, the exact amount she had tried to forget for 17 years. She rushed to the kitchen, yanked open the cabinet under the sink, and pulled out an old Folgers coffee tin. Inside, a cracked flip phone wrapped in duct tape and silence. She powered it on. It buzzed immediately. One message, one sender. Her lawyer. Stay put. They know. Genevieve's eyes welled up, not from fear, but recognition. She wasn't invisible anymore. The secret she'd carried like a loaded weapon had just gone off on live television. Jasmine hadn't said her name, but the whole damn world was now knocking on her door with questions she swore she'd never answer. And deep down, she knew one thing: the moment had finally arrived. Whether she was ready or not, the flashback hit her like a wave soaked in gasoline. Phoenix, 2005, a hotel suite that smelled like bourbon and too much silence. Genevieve sat at the edge of a leather sofa, still in her surgical scrubs knuckles, white from gripping her purse. Across from her, Donald Trump paced slowly, hands behind his back, like a man examining a chessboard where every piece already belonged to him. On the coffee table, a stack of papers, neatly clipped, waiting. "This is how winners protect their future," he said, tapping the folder without looking up. She stared at the bold letters across the top: non-disclosure and financial settlement agreement. She asked if he would acknowledge the child. He didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. "I'm not here to play house," he said flatly. "I'm here to keep things clean." She signed, with trembling hands and a heart that hadn't stopped screaming since the test came back. No birth certificate signature, no phone calls after, just silence, and a wire transfer that arrived 2 days later like a receipt for erasure. She remembered the carpet pattern under her shoes, red and gold woven tight like secrets. She remembered the way the door clicked shut behind her like a vault sealing itself. And she remembered thinking just for a moment that maybe this was mercy. But now, as Jasmine Crockett tore open the past on national television, Genevieve realized it hadn't been mercy at all. It was the beginning of a lie that grew claws. And tonight it had finally come back to bite. Her hands were still shaking when she sat down at the kitchen table, the burner phone vibrating against her palm like a live fuse. Genevieve didn't hesitate. She pressed call and waited. When the line picked up, she didn't bother with pleasantries. "I'm done hiding," she said. "They already opened the door. I'm not going to lock it again." On the other end, her attorney Harris Nolan paused. He'd waited years for this moment, but he didn't expect it to come from her lips, not like this. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. "Once we step in, there's no turning back." Genevieve didn't blink. "I lost my name, my voice, and my child's truth. That ends now." An hour later, a single-line statement hit the inboxes of every major newsroom on the East Coast. It came from Nolan's law firm, stamped and signed. "My client is prepared to confirm the authenticity of the sealed documents referenced by Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett." That was it. No names, no interviews, just a tremor strong enough to make news directors spill their coffee. In Washington, producers scrambled to bump programming. In New York, headlines were rewritten mid-print. And in Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump stared at a silent TV screen that now felt like a loaded weapon pointed straight at his legacy. Can the voice of one woman crumble a political empire? She waited until after dark to make the call, not because of fear, but because her voice would have cracked if she'd done it any earlier. Genevieve sat alone in her living room, the flickering light of the television casting long, broken shadows on the wall. Her fingers hovered over the screen, then pressed one name. Her son picked up after the second ring. "Hey, Mom, you okay?" She couldn't speak right away, just breathed. "Then there's something I need to tell you. About your father." A beat of silence. No surprise in his voice, no anger, just quiet. "I always knew it wasn't just about the money," he said softly. "You never looked at it like a gift." Genevieve's eyes burned. She swallowed hard. "You are the reason I stayed quiet," she whispered. "But now..." You're the reason I'll speak. She could feel it, the weight of 17 years lifting molecule by molecule. Her son didn't hesitate. Then let's speak loud enough they can't look away. The call ended without drama, without tears. Just a shared understanding between two people who had lived inside someone else's secret for too long. Each passing car felt like a journalist arriving too late. Somewhere another journalist had just confirmed her name. The world was waking up, and this time they weren't whispering. They were listening, and so was the state. By sunrise, the aftershocks had reached every corner of the country. In a public high school in Milwaukee, Mr. Hugo Bren, who had taught civics for 22 years, scratched out the lesson plan he'd prepped the night before. Instead, he scrawled one sentence across the whiteboard. Today we talk about truth and power, and who gets crushed when they collide. His students, normally half asleep, looked up in silence. No one scrolled their phones. Across the plains of Iowa, a mother of 3 named Lorna Peak posted a message that broke through the digital noise. I voted for him. Twice. But today I stand with the woman who told the truth when it wasn't safe. Her words spread faster than she expected, shared by friends, then strangers, then reporters. Within hours, her post was read live on air. In Birmingham, Alabama, the owner of a small barbershop turned down the sports channel and flipped to the news. Y'all see her eyes, he muttered. That ain't politics. That's war wounds. His customers, young, old, conservative, liberal, fell quiet. Even the razor stopped buzzing. The country wasn't arguing. Not yet. It was watching, processing, and somewhere deep inside trying to decide what mattered more, who the father was, or who had the courage to finally speak. The ground hadn't just shifted beneath their feet. It cracked wide open. And no one, not even those in power, knew what would crawl out next. She didn't call for a press conference. She didn't need music handlers or a podium flanked by flags. Jasmine Crockett stood alone beneath the Capitol steps, surrounded by flashing cameras and a country trying to figure out what side of history it was on. Her blazer was dark, her expression darker. No smile, no spin, just steel. When a reporter shouted, "Do you think this will help your approval ratings?" she didn't flinch. She looked directly into the lens eyes, unwavering. Truth doesn't chase polls, she said. It stands its ground, even when the ground is shaking. The clip was uploaded within minutes. Millions watched, replayed, looped the moment like it was prophecy. Teenagers turned it into audio for TikTok. Veterans stitched it with old footage of Watergate hearings. On Twitter, someone posted, "She didn't speak loud. She spoke right." But behind the calm, Jasmine was tightening every bolt of her conviction. She knew what would come next. Legal threats, media spin, maybe worse. But she also knew something else. Once you show the public a sealed door, they start demanding to know what's behind it, and she was ready to open it. What happens when silence finally says enough? In a dim records room, 2 floors beneath the Maricopa County Family Court, Judge Rosanna Vitarelli stood alone with her hand hovering over the drawer that hadn't been touched in 5 years. The label on the folder was faded but still legible, TBV DJT case sealed. By special request. She was 67 now, weeks from retirement, and this file had haunted her since the day it arrived. She remembered the rush order, the unmarked courier, the call from a federal judge who told her in no uncertain terms, national security is in play. Back then, she hadn't asked questions, not out loud, but they lingered in her chest like dust no ruling could sweep clean. And now, with Crockett's voice replaying in headlines across every screen in America, the question had come roaring back. She opened the drawer. Inside, a sealed affidavit, a DNA test request bearing Genevieve Larson's alias. The official court order demanding compliance signed by Vitarelli herself, dated 2019. Next to it, a stack of extension requests from Trump's legal team, scheduling conflicts, confidential proceedings, and finally a quiet motion to dismiss, citing extraordinary executive obligations. But what struck her most was what wasn't there. No test result, no denial, just evasion. Vitarelli exhaled slowly, thumb brushing the corner of the order, like tracing the edge of a wound. For 5 years, she'd convinced herself this was just another sealed case. But in that moment, she knew the truth: she hadn't buried a file. She'd buried a match on top of a fuse. Tucked inside the case file, behind the court orders and legal motions, was a memo Judge Vitarelli didn't remember approving, but remembered reading. It wasn't filed through official channels. It had no court stamp. Just a letterhead from a private law firm linked quietly to Trump's inner circle, and a single line typed in bold at the top, "Client refuses biological testing." Her eyes narrowed as she read on. "Recommend private resolution, sealed financial agreement, gag clause, no further public inquiry." Beneath that, a handwritten signature. No title, no explanation. But the initials were unmistakable. She'd seen those same strokes in 100 redacted filings. She looked again, and her stomach dropped. It matched Jasmine Crockett's file. Word for word, phrase for phrase, even the formatting. This wasn't coincidence. This was a carbon copy. And that meant only one thing: Crockett had access to documents that were never supposed to leave this building. Vitarelli felt the room tilt slightly, like the floor had just shifted under her heels. It wasn't just a cover-up, it was coordination. A legal machine engineered to suffocate the truth before it ever reached oxygen. And now someone had cracked the casing. The memo wasn't just proof, it was confession. And once the public saw it, there would be no walking it back, no redactions, no spin, no executive privilege, just a single damning question. What kind of power builds an empire? By refusing a test, Judge Vitarelli stood motionless, the memo still trembling between her fingers. Outside the records room, the courthouse buzzed with the routine clatter of hearings and footfalls, but down here, time had stopped. She reached for the landline on the desk, the same one she hadn't used for anything personal in years. With a deep breath, she dialed a number she never thought she'd need. It rang twice. Then a voice answered, calm, focused, Congresswoman Crockett's office. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't clear her throat. "Tell her it's Judge Rosanna Vitarelli. She'll want to take this." Seconds later, Jasmine was on the line. No small talk, no politics, just the kind of silence that begs for truth. "Congresswoman," the judge said, voice sharp with guilt and finality, "the test was never taken. I have the original court order and the memo." On the other end, Jasmine didn't gasp, didn't respond right away. Just a slow exhale, like someone watching the final piece of a puzzle fall into place. "Can you send it?" she asked quietly. "I'll send it myself," the judge replied. "No redactions, no seals, not this time." That afternoon, the file was hand-delivered to Capitol Hill in a plain white envelope. Its weight wasn't measured in pages, but in consequences. When the court hit it, who were they protecting? The network cut regular programming without warning. A red banner flared across the screen. "Breaking Rep, Jasmine Crockett. Live with Anderson Pike." The studio lights were dimmer than usual, the background stripped bare, no graphics, no music. Just two chairs, one truth, and the weight of a nation watching. Anderson Pike leaned forward, pen tapping against his clipboard, like a countdown. "You are accusing a former president," he said, his voice tight. "On live television, with documents that were never supposed to see the light of day. Aren't you afraid?" Jasmine didn't blink. "No," she said. "I'm more afraid of what silence does to a democracy." The words hit like a hammer through glass. There was no applause, no dramatic swell. Just stillness, like the entire country paused to let it sink in. Pike glanced down, then back up. "Are you saying the White House knowingly buried the truth?" Jasmine nodded once. "I'm saying the machine built to protect power used me, used the courts, and used this country to protect a lie." The camera zoomed in just enough to catch the edge of a folder beneath her hand, the same folder she had carried since the hearing. And, though she hadn't opened it yet, everyone watching knew. The moment she did nothing in American politics would look the same again. Inside the Mar-a-Lago war room, screens glowed like open wounds. Every network had Jasmine's face front and center. Every headline screamed a different version of the same nightmare. Trump paced like a cornered animal, red tie, crooked rage, pulsing beneath his skin. He slammed his fist on the table. "We sue her now. Every outlet, every platform. I want lawsuits on their desks by morning." Across the room, Hope Sinclair, his longtime legal counsel, didn't move. She didn't even look up from the transcript she was reading. "You can't sue her," she said flatly. "Not if she has that judge's order. That's not defamation. That's devastation." Trump spun toward her. "So we do nothing." She looked up then, eyes like cold steel. No, but this isn't a courtroom anymore. This is triage. You're bleeding in front of 300 million people. Brian Halford, chief of staff, stepped in quietly. We've confirmed the document was hand-delivered to the Hill. It matches Crockett's file. Word for word. Trump's jaw clenched. Find the leak. I don't care if it's a clerk, a janitor, or the damn judge. Someone talks. Someone pays. But even as he barked orders, the room wasn't reacting the same. Staffers didn't scramble. They looked paralyzed. Because for the first time, they weren't managing a scandal. They were standing inside the collapse. By dawn, the numbers told a different story than the spin. A flash poll from DataPulse showed 51% of Americans believe Jasmine Crockett. Only 29% believe Trump. The rest, silent watching, were slipping. And once public trust starts bleeding, it doesn't clot easy. In D.C., cameras hunted politicians like hounds. Reporters cornered senators in elevators, hallways, stairwells. Most ducked. Some ran. One congressman muttered, "No comment," 6 times in 20 seconds before the door mercifully closed. But the public, they weren't dodging anything. In Georgia, a retired teacher posted, "If she's lying, prove it. If she's not, apologize to the country." In a Detroit diner, a waitress printed out the court order and taped it to the coffee machine. "So every man that lies to his family has to read it with his sugar," she told a customer. The internet wasn't debating, it was archiving. Jasmine's interview looped on TikTok, dubbed over with gospel choirs, protest drums, and violin covers. Each clip of her voice didn't just echo, it marched. And in the quiet corridors of the West Wing, aides stopped pretending they were in control. Because the firewall was gone. The media blitz had failed. The legal threats were laughable. What do you do when the evidence burns through your last defense? She didn't need a podium. She didn't need a team. At exactly 9:03 a.m., Jasmine Crockett stepped out of a silver sedan onto the marble steps of the Capitol alone. No entourage, no media escort, just the sound of her heels against stone and the faint hum of America holding its breath. She wore navy, no pin, no logo. In her right hand, no binder, no folder, just a single sheet of paper folded once tight. The wind tugged at its edge like even the air wanted to see what it said. Reporters already camped out for hours surged forward. No one yelled, no one dared. She didn't wave, she didn't smile. She walked like gravity belonged to her. Cameras snapped like firecrackers. Flashes flared, but Jasmine's eyes never left the mic. As she stepped behind it, she paused not for drama, but for control. She unfolded the paper slowly, carefully, like she'd rehearsed it in her mind 100 times and still hated how it felt in her hand. Then she raised it just above the mic line so every lens could focus. Every soul could freeze. It was the original 2019 court order, signed, stamped, demanding a DNA test. One that had never been taken. One that was never supposed to be seen. Jasmine didn't need to shout. Her voice low and controlled, sliced cleaner than any headline. "You were denied the truth for 5 years," she said, eyes locked on the sea of cameras. "I won't let it be 6. Her hand didn't tremble as she lowered the paper. It didn't need to. The weight of it had already shaken half the country. Behind her, an aide stepped forward, not to speak, just to receive. Jasmine handed over a sealed envelope, then a second and a third, each marked for a different office. The House Ethics Committee, the Department of Justice, the Federal Office of Public Records. No redactions, no conditions, no spin. "This," she said, holding up a copy of the now verified memo, "is not an accusation. It's a record. And records don't lie. People do." Gasps rippled through the press line. Some reporters instinctively reached for their phones. Others just stared. No one interrupted. No one dared. What they witnessed wasn't a political maneuver. It was a release of evidence, of silence, of fear. And Jasmine Crockett, without ever raising her voice, had just handed the truth back to the people it was stolen from. Jasmine's fingers curled slightly around the podium's edge. The wind pressed against her coat like the country itself was leaning in to hear. She didn't blink. She didn't waver. Her final words came not as a headline, but a verdict. "This was never about a child," she said, her voice steady as a gavel. "This was about a country, about a man who ran from a test and prayed you'd never ask why. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was electric. Reporters didn't shout, protesters didn't chant. Even the cameras, usually twitching with life, stood still, like they knew they'd just recorded the last breath of a lie. Jasmine stepped back, folded the copy of the order, and walked away. No escort, no protection, no applause. Just footsteps echoing through marble as the nation exhaled all at once. Behind her, headlines detonated. Screens flipped from speculation to surrender. Allies of power suddenly found their phones silent. And for the first time in years, no one dared say fake news. Because this time, truth had teeth, and it bit. What kind of leader do we become when truth finally wins? Sometimes what topples an empire isn't a scandal. It's a single question asked at the right moment. Why did you run from the truth? When truth comes into the light, it doesn't just shake the powerful, it forces all of us to look inward. Have you ever stayed silent because you thought your voice couldn't change anything? If this story struck a nerve, don't just scroll past it. Like, share and subscribe to Hill Insights, where hidden truths rise and silence has nowhere left to hide. Tap the bell, because the next revelation might echo your own. Which moment made you pause and ask, what else have they buried? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because truth isn't truth until it's shared. This dramatized story is inspired by real struggles and real people. All characters and dialogue are fictionalized for commentary and education. It is not intended to defame or mislead, but to inspire reflection in civic awareness. Thanks for watching. Truth isn't gone, it's just been waiting for someone like you to listen.